Hello and welcome to Tyrannus Gaming. Today we're going to be discussing Caliban, the isekai protagonist from the Beyblade universe. We'll be utilizing 20 times corrupted bombards. It will be steel path, the AI will be paused so I can explain what's going on, the enemy level will be 140. Let's discuss Caliban's number 1 ability, also known as Razor Gyre. This is what it looks like. You'll notice some of the enemies took bleed damage. This is because Slash is the primary attack effector of this ability. It has a 10% chance to inflict bleed damage bypassing armor, hitting their health directly. Now you'd think that was the end of it, but this ability, like an isekai protagonist character's ability list, never ends. This ability has so many secondary effects, I'm actually surprised it's not its own dedicated Warframe. Every enemy we just striked adds 4 health regen to us, meaning that if we strike 20 enemies, we have 80 health regeneration per second so long as this effect is active. And, if you happen to notice, if we tap number 1 and then hold down the trigger button, if you look at the top right, you'll notice that our damage bonus kept increasing, up to 1,000, and far beyond depending on how much energy you have and how high the efficiency is. Now for the sake of my sanity, let's move on to his ability number 2, also known as Sentient Wrath. This is what it looks like. You'll notice it arbitrarily lifts 16 out of 20 enemies, and causes lift, meaning that they can just casually float away, and if you happen to shoot them while they're floating, it'll simply disable the lifted effect and allow them to shoot back at you. So, I would advise using the lifted status and shooting the ones that it doesn't affect. Unless, of course, the game and enemy decides to have buggy animation and simply float the survivors, or should I say our victims, directly in front of you, causing some rather strange effects, and completely disabling your ability to do any real crowd control because they don't stay in place. I would also point out that when you use this ability and the enemy is lifted, any explosion in the area can arbitrarily sling them across the map, and thus allow them to come back and haunt your dreams about 5 seconds later. Now, I would also point out that this ability actually does have a useful effect. The damage vulnerability window is 35%, not really justifying the fact that they can be slung around the map. Now you may have noticed that I mentioned that the number 1 ability, our Beyblade activation ability, has more abilities than an isekai protagonist. This is because it does, and if we happen to use our number 2 ability, we can activate number 1 and have yet more effects. That cause us to arbitrarily throw everybody around. I bring this up because Caliban has no abilities that can actually take advantage of scattered enemies. Moving on to Caliban's number 3 ability, also known as Lethal Progeny. Like an isekai protagonist, we can use the power of friendship to disable our opponents and distract them. I'm going to first explain what they do, as when they die, they release a lethal scream that irritates me to no end. Once a Lethal Progeny is activated, a Conculist will be summoned. This Conculist creates a taunting effect that activates with the priority level of an allied Warframe. This means if you simply summon one between you and the enemy will actively attack it until it is either dead or the timer expires. It will also turn around and attack them, distracting them long enough for you to either shoot them to kill or to simply run away. This is what that looks like. You'll notice at the top right, we have yet a secondary effect. It's 25 shield regeneration provided by our Conculist friend. That turns our shields from blue to purple and regenerates it up to 625 shields per summon duration. If we simply resummon him, it'll continuously go up until it caps out at 1850. If this seems a little bit overpowered, it will be if you happen to spec it for ability strength. Now, like an isekai protagonist, we can simply summon 3 for the power of friendship, thus giving us 75 shield regeneration and making us nigh unkillable at lower levels. There are actually two ways to utilize Lethal Progeny. You can either do what I just did and summon all three of them and let them attack the enemy while you simply run around helping them, or we can utilize them like a throwaway disposable shield regeneration to repeatedly trigger shield gating. Shield gating is a mechanic by which if your shields suddenly drop to 0, it will give you a brief window of immortality from 0.33 seconds to 2.8 seconds. I've heard Hildren can actually have it up to 5 seconds, which is rather unique for her, as she has dedicated shields and virtually no health. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. Go ahead and watch my shields and watch what I do when it reaches 0. You may have noticed every time my shields hit 0, I decided to resummon a Conculist. While there is no limitation on how many times you can resummon them, there is a max duration and a max limit on how many you can summon at a time. You can only summon 3 at a time, but if you happen to have duration down to 5 to 10 seconds, you can simply summon one with just enough time to trigger shield gating. Prior to the Abyss of Dagoth, shield gating was a process by which, if you had a Decaying Dragon Key equipped, you would have a max of 75 shields and 1.33 seconds of shield gating. This means that if your shields dropped and popped to 0, you would have 1 second of immortality, and you would have approximately a few seconds before your shields would max out, giving you the ability to have immortality again if your shields happen to drop to 0 again. This meant with the correct build, you would effectively have repeated shield gating and be virtually immortal. However, after the Abyss of Dagoth, overshields do not affect the duration of shield gating, meaning if you have 10,000 overshields, it will still not actually affect the maximum duration of immortality. However, shield gating is actually now completely dynamic. This means so long as you have 1 point of shield or 1,000, it matters not, you will simply have anywhere between 0.33 and 3 seconds of immortality. Now that we've covered 69 of Caliban's abilities, disguised as 3 icons on the bottom, we're going to go over his number 4, which is rather simple and straightforward. However, let's do a very quick tech demonstration before I use it. You'll notice our overpowered Brayton here managed to get half of his health dropped, and if we utilize the Zorus, which is widely available to literally every player that bothered playing the Codex, this is what that looks like. Three strikes and we managed to kill one, thanks to the finisher ability that managed to pop up. But if you'll happen to notice, we did jack all to the rest of them. Now, without cutting this, I want to demonstrate why his number 4 is so useful. Let's go ahead and utilize Fusion Strike. You'll notice that we completely armor strip them, and you can tell by the fact that they have no yellow in their health bar, and their health bar is red. If you're colorblind, I'm sorry, I don't really know what else to say. It switched from a dark gray to a light gray, or possibly from a light gray to a dark gray. Either way, I hope you get the point. I would advise using Fusion Strike twice in order to fully armor strip them, and you can just use your imagination from there. But now that they have no armor, let's go ahead and redo exactly what we just did a moment ago, and see how much more damage we can do. As you can tell, with headshots, we managed to kill one rather quickly, but with shooting the other one in the body, we managed to trigger the finisher, allowing us to kill him. We could not actually do this with our prior one as we were drastically short. This is why armor stripping is incredibly important. This is what it looks like before we finish the armor strip. As you can tell, it took 3 hits to strip the shields, but it doesn't actually do much damage thanks to their armor. However, I would like to point out that despite the fact that some of these guys recover their armor, I'm going to show you why it is that Caliban's number 4 ability is so much fun. It still stripped all their armor, even though their armor regenerated. So, let's go ahead and see what the Zorus does with 3 hits that it couldn't do prior with a simple armor strip. I'm sorry, did I say 3 hits? I meant 30. As that pretty much sums up what Caliban's abilities are. However, you get the point at what Fusion Strike is capable of. I do like Caliban, but I feel like he needs a bit more focus. If you feel like I've played him in error, or you feel like I just don't know what I'm talking about, please don't just drop a dislike. Also explain specifically what it is I did wrong, what I could improve on, what mods I could possibly use, and I hope you all have a good night.